Humans are created in the divine image. Humans are not just a little bit that's broken off when God finished doing something else. Humans are not an accident, a sort of a cosmic that just happened like this. Humans have a very special, unique place within the entire design and narrative of creation. It's not just that God makes something which sits there like a picture, like a model that you might see in a storefront window. What God is doing is launching something which is going somewhere. And though this is very mysterious, it looks when we put the whole thing together so that the power and love and stewardship and sovereignty of God can be exercised in the world through the image.
Yes, so I hope you've been able to be with us throughout this whole series. It's been amazing. If this is your first time with us, we welcome you. I've already met some first-time people who are here with us. And I want to say a welcome, special welcome to you, because I know it takes a lot of courage to show up at a church that you've never been to, and especially one like ours that, is kind of big and, like, where do I go? Where do I park? All the things. So welcome, and everyone who's in the chapel. We've got hundreds of people through the morning who are in the chapel as well, because our sanctuary, many of you know, all of us perhaps know, being renovated or refreshed. And we're just an exciting time in the life of our church. We'll keep you posted there. We're going to come back together there. And at some point, we'll all come back together in the sanctuary, which will be a glorious day. We're glad that you're here today. We were talking about what it is to be fully embodied, integrated, complete people created in the image of God. Today we're going to talk about what happens when we get off track, because we all do, and we all are fallen sinners who have twisted desires that get us into trouble. Today we're talking about addiction. And before you say, oh, well, I came on the wrong day, I'm not an addict, not so fast. Am I right? See, the Bible says in Romans 3:23, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It's missing the mark, is what that is. And today we're going to talk about habitual sin. We all have that. We're going to talk about our go-to sin. And I'm going to just straight up from the start, I want to challenge you, always preaching, teaching towards application, not leave it in the room, but to live it out. I want you to think about, what is your go-to sin? Where are you prone to go? Because the truth is, for a lot of us, like if I were a priest, I had a conversation this week with a guy. So you're a priest? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. I'm a bridge from us to God, from you to God. And if I were a priest, I was thinking about this, and we had daily confession, right? Or weekly confession, whatever. A lot of us would just hit record and then show up again the next day and hit repeat and just play it again. Because we keep falling for the same temptations into sin over and over again. The same sins can beset many of us. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And our hope today is that you will draw a line in the sand. We've already seen God move powerfully through the morning. And we're going to just say, I'm done. Because you don't have to keep living this way. You say, no, Jeff, you don't know. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. It's something I've tried to overcome. That's a lie from the evil one. You don't have to live this way anymore. And so we're going to talk about that today. All right. So I want you to turn in your Bible. You can turn to James chapter 1. And I want you to think again, what is your go-to sin? While you're turning, everybody turn into James chapter 1. We're going to be at verses 12 and 15. Because what we see in our lives, it could be fits of anger, right? It could be pornography. It could be you're drinking too much. It could be you're medicating your pain in some way. It could be that you're just whipping lazy, or you're watching way too much Netflix or something. It could be your phone. Now I'm preaching. It could be your screen. You're constantly going back. You can't seem to break away from it. What is your go-to habitual sin that you can't seem to shake? Today is a wake-up call. That's what it is. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, he says this, be alert and sober-minded. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Now here in the global West, we're so whipping smart, educated. We're like, yeah, whatever, a devil out there. What's he running around with a pitchfork or something coming after? I don't think so. And yet you go to other parts of the world, as I have, and they'll say, oh yeah, there's an evil one. In fact, from a biblical worldview of spiritual warfare in the world, those who believe and understand the darkness of the evil one and temptation come, that's how they make sense of the world. And that's how we can make sense of it too. Because all of us are being challenged, we're being tempted all the time. And we're going to talk today about overcoming temptation. Here in this passage, you're going to see the blessing of perseverance. Why are we going to stay the course? Because there is a great reward in this life even to staying obedient to the Lord. We're going to talk about the source of temptation because we're in a battle, and we're going to talk about the consequence of unchecked desires. Okay? So first of all, the blessing of perseverance. In James chapter 1, we're going to begin with verse 12 because James had placed it in context. He's been talking about trial and temptation. The same word, by the way, perismos in the Greek, and they're translated differently based on the content. So he's talking about a little nuance difference here, but they have a lot in common. But watch how this plays out. Verse 12, he says this, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. All right? So whether that trial is suffering, whether it's temptation, here's the word. The word perismos, here's the thing. Does God test us? You bet he does. Does he tempt us towards sin? Never. And that's what James is going to say. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life, which God has promised to those who love him. So what we see here is he's saying you got to be diligent. Persevere. You're in a battle. Don't give up. Keep fighting the fight. We fall into habitual sin. We fall into addiction when we give up and we stop fighting. I used to tell my son Travis through his teenage years, the good guys fight. The good guys fight. In other words, if you're fighting, you're one of the good guys. If you don't fight, then you've given up. And look at what he says. He says you get the crown of life. What is this? This is not like a crown a king or king would wear. That's another word. This word it describes a wreath or a garland, if you know the history here. We just got done with the Olympics. This is what a victorious athlete would receive. Like, you won this thing. And isn't that what overcoming temptation feels like? It's like, yes, this time I did it. You know, I was tempted and I overcame. But here's the question I have for you today. Are you really in the fight? Some of us need to be reminded of the battle that we're in. And I would just ask you, are you really fighting against sin in your life? Or have you just drifted into particular sin and you're just kind of living with it? It's going to take you down. And it's impacting people all around you more than you even know. Remember and persevere in moments of temptation. And then secondly, the source of temptation. This is important to understand. Look at this. Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm being tempted by God. You can't say, God's tripping me up. For God tempts no one with evil. And he himself tempts no one. But each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. Now there is an evil one who tempts it. There are spiritual forces in the world coming after us. But it is our own bent, our own evil desires that turn us into addiction, into sin. So we can't say God's doing it. No, you're doing this. And the difference here is God does test us. Don't miss this. Like, wait, what? How crazy is that? No. Watch. Here's what we do. We're tempted even, or we enter into trial and struggles. He allows us to be, go into all kinds of situations, right? And life is a constant decision of whether I'm going to follow God or whether I will follow myself. And so the test becomes this. I'm being tempted. And oftentimes we think, yep, here I go, sin. And even neural pathways in our brain that cause us to think, yeah, every time I'm tempted with this, that's where I go. Here comes temptation. Next step is sin. No. Here comes temptation. The next step is obedience. God says, bam, there you go. Now you're stronger. God, why'd you put me to the test? To make you stronger, to make you grow. And we can keep away from particular temptations if we'll only cut it at the root. And we're going to talk about that today, all right? There's a lot to diagnose here today. And we're going to do the same on Wednesday night when we come back together. But look at the third thing I want you to see. First of all, the blessing of perseverance. We see the source of temptation and then the consequence of unchecked desire. Then, he says in verse 15, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. Yo, listen, don't miss this. Sin, by its very nature, is self-destructive. Sin will lead to death. And this is not just spiritual death, not experiencing life. It can lead to ultimate death and eternal death apart from God. Sin will take you down, is why this is so important for us to identify and talk about this. But look at what it says. He says here, check this out. James is saying lust gets pregnant, has a baby named sin. Sin grows up, becomes the killer. That sounds like addiction, because it is. We all wrestle with this. It's when we our unchecked desires, we seek this disordered love we talk about often. Love out of order says, I'm going to go to this thing for what I know I'm needing, or maybe a quick fix, a quick relief from what I'm wrestling with. I'm going to go to this, and it's not God. And we go to something else, and it by its nature then becomes this self-destructive thing that we keep running to. Becomes the neural pathways or the patterns that we follow in our lives. This is addiction, and addiction will take you down. And today's the day for you to end it. This passage also points to the hope that we have when we cut it off at the root and we decide, no more will I live this way. And we've been praying today, like the miraculous God that we serve, who knows you better than you know yourself. Lord, move now in my life, today. And we're calling on God to move, because overcoming addiction is not just managing behavior. It's coming before God and saying, I cannot do this. I have a problem. It means we're going to get real honest, because only Jesus can transform the human heart. You need a new heart. So the Bible tells us over and over again, he's the one who gives life. And so it's turning to him to be honest and saying, I need your help. And the Lord says, okay, I know this. And he runs to us. Listen, you need to hear this today. Whatever you're wrestling with, your sin doesn't disgust him. I mean, he doesn't like, or here you come again. He never does that. He says, come on. See, our struggles, our sin actually triggers his love towards us. It's the Father running after the prodigal son. So if you feel that way today, the Lord is saying, come to me, because this is all our story. And we thought the best way to help us all enter into this story is for you to hear the story of my good friend, Michael Moulton. And we thought the best way to do that before we have a conversation is for you to hear his story, to watch his story. Some of you may have seen his I Am Second video, because it's some 40 million views. It's been the most watched one they've done over the past few years, and you'll see why. Watch the video and get to know our friend Michael Moulton.
In 2011, I encountered my first encounter with the law. I got pulled over. I was intoxicated and had a lot of cocaine in my truck, and I encountered my very first arrest. And I went down to jail, and I had arrived in a place that I said I would never go. After my very first mugshot, I was devastated. It was on the internet, and I was doing everything I could to make this mugshot go away. And little did I know I was stimulating it where more people would see it. I said, I'm never drinking alcohol. I'm never doing drugs again. And when I got released, I got back to my apartment, and I took one sip of alcohol, and I was drunk and high again that night. You know, I'm becoming this man that I thought I would never be. In 4 years, I accumulated 27 mugshots. Each mugshot was more of a give up. I went to a dark place. And I turned to drugs and alcohol more than ever, and then getting rearrested. And on my 27th mugshot, I knew it was over. And I was about to go to prison for a long time. They transferred me to a aggravated assault tank. It was full of murderers and people who were doing life. I wasn't supposed to be there. I never put hands on anybody. I'm living in a 4x9 size room, and the doors are closed, 22 hours of the day. And I would just pace and pace and pace and pace. And this old man, they called him Ooey. He says, "You're doing hard time." And he says, "Man, they're going to chew you off the bone." I said, "What do you mean hard time?" He says, "You're out in that world. Get out of that world." When I drank and I did drugs, I started feeling like everybody around me looked. In high school, I attempted to take my own life. I got in my car and I saw a telephone pole and I just nailed it. Went through the windshield, woke up in a hospital. Man, I'm still alive. I'm going to get in trouble. When I would meet someone and I felt like I was trying to let them close, if they did not want to be around me, I felt abandoned. And my solution to that was radical. In 2011, I encountered my first encounter with the law. 27 mugshots. Aggravated assault tank full of murderers. Pace and pace and pace. Man, they're going to chew you off the bone. And then something happened. I got this book called The Living Recovery Bible from a gangbanger who was using it as a pillow. This man, Ooey, who is my cellie, which is my cellmate, who's doing life for murder, asked me to read to him. And I said, "Why?" He says, "I can't read. I can't write." And as I'm reading this to him, nothing's happening, but I start recognizing and feeling that 4 days go by and I'm not pacing anymore. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting, because I wasn't anxious and paranoid. And I start reading this, and it's the story of Joseph. I'm like, man, this is my story. And on July 7th, 2017, I woke up out of a sleep on the top bunk. And, I didn't pray anything. I wasn't like, come into my life, save me. I just woke up and I sat up. I took this deep breath and I felt like I was having a heart attack. And I just go, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? And I'm doing this, and Ooey's sleeping, and I just go, And as I did that, this feeling of all this hate, anger, resentment, and just all these feelings are just coming out of my body. And I take this deep breath and I just go, like that. And it was just like ice water coming into my body. And I'm like going, wow, I feel so much love. And I'm like looking around, and I'm looking at guards, and I go, I love that dude. I love her. I love him. And I looked down at Ooey. I said, love him. And man, just something happened. And then I started reading the Bible again. It started making sense to me. And then another inmate comes in and he says, man, what are you doing? I said, man, I'm just doing me. So this whole group of these murderers come hanging out with me. And I read something to them. They go, what are you reading? I read it to them. They said, well, you keep reading to us. I said, well, why? They said, we can't read. And I looked up at God and I said, man, I see you. I see you. And I was reading more and more. And as I'm doing this tank starts coming closer and closer together. The guards were just amazed that this tank was so close and we were serving one another. And I realized that the reason why I was at peace and I was at home and I felt safe is because reading to people, for the first time, I was out of self and I was serving someone else. On October 13th, 2017, they came over the microphone and they said, Michael Moulton, clean your bunk and collect your junk. And the whole tank is going, what is going on? I was released because of a technicality, a paperwork error. Once I got outside and I could see the sun for the first time and feel air and breathe in, and then fear crept in. What do I do? Where do I go? I have no money. I have nobody, no one to call. And God said, walk. not audibly. I used to hear people say that. I thought that was witchcraft. And he spoke to me through thoughts and feelings, and he told me to walk. So I made the journey 300 miles back to Dallas to turn myself in. That's where Judge Bennett was. And she said, when you get released, come back and see me. So I did. I show up to Judge Bennett's court, and she said, I've heard what you've been doing. Word got back to her through inmates that were coming to see her, saying that this guy that they were locked up with has changed their life. And she says, I don't want to get in the way of that. I'm going to set you free. I said, I'm already free. And she pardoned me and said, go pay it forward. That's what I'm doing. You know, all the times I was hitting rock bottom, I was always digging to get out of the bottom. And what I was doing is I was using the tools that got me to rock bottom. I was using the same tools to get out of the bottom. Resentment, anger. I'll show you. I'm going to make the comeback. This last time I stayed at the bottom. You know, I finally realized that the rock at the bottom at all these times was God. Why would I want to run from the rock? So I stayed next to the rock. My relationship with Christ is... it's a very intimate relationship. I mean, it's a personal relationship. He's my homeboy. You know, he's my buddy. He loves me for exactly who I am. He forgives me. I still betray him to this day, but I realize it and I come running back to him. He'll never betray me. He'll never abandon me. He's a very simple person for a complicated person like me. My name is Michael Moulton, also known as M to the Rock, and I am second.
Hey, let's welcome Michael Moulton, M to the Rock. Come on up here, man. Great to see you. I'm so glad you're here.
My man.
Wow.
The doc.
So, have a seat. Yeah, you reminded me this week as we were meeting, we've been friends for 24 years. I was his pastor
24
during that
years.
time. I didn't do a very good
You
job.
didn't do a good job 24 years ago.
I
I had no tats and... Come on, Doc.
We've seen
I thought you were a doctor.
I know, right? I don't know anything. So, wow, it's so great to have you here.
It's an honor.
I mean,
I'm so glad to get to be here.
You've impacted my life in big ways, and we've remained friends through it all. Yeah. It's been a wild ride, but it's been a beautiful thing. And I'm just so glad that my people get to meet you, a man who's influenced me in big ways. So let's dive straight in. Talk to us about addiction. I told you while I was studying, preparing for this message, the question I had going in was, okay, what's the difference between habitual sin, and you've heard me say it, this morning even, habitual sin and addiction? Because isn't there clinical addiction? And what's the difference? And when I was asking you that in prep for this sermon, what's the difference?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The word addiction is not in the Bible.
Right.
It's the word sin, and as man, we love to wordsmith things. It's called justification. I don't want to talk about sin, so I'm going to put a label on it. And call it addiction, and then create stigma and all that. But what is addiction? What's the definition of it? When we think of addiction, we think of drug addiction and alcoholism, right? Because our behaviors are so radical. The consequences are so severe, so we just put them over here, and they say, I'm not an addict because I don't drink and I do drugs. I don't have that addictive personality. Yes, you do. We all do.
Right.
Okay. So what is addiction? Back to that. Addiction is simply this: it's a person, it's a place, or a thing, and here's the scary one, everyone, or a thought that has become my source. Person, place, thing, or a thought that has become my source. Source
of what? Source of?
To ease the pain and the suffering. Person, place, or thing. A visible thing. My whole life I was seeking visible things to try to fix my invisible problems. All right? And why do drug addicts and alcoholics frustrate and bother people that don't use drugs and alcohol? And the reason why is because they're actually seeing their character defects and their behaviors live on stage, but we just put the drug addicts and alcoholics over here because we're actually seeking other visible things to try to fix our invisible problems.
So you've taught me, we often do, we categorize, we can talk about.
We label.
The homeless person, they're an addict or whatever, that person. And then that makes me, I'm not one of those people.
Right.
And this is such a key, or I don't realize it yet, because such a key learning, gang, don't miss this. We're all addicts. We're all addicts in some form, some way. And we need to address those habitual sins we run to. Right?
Yeah, what we do is we need to stop focusing on the word addiction and start focusing on why the addiction. Okay, let's break it down. Let's put the addiction street name word away. We need to start focusing on the sin, not the sin, but why the sin. Why the sin? And that's where we get truly honest with ourselves, because the real problem lies within. Because my whole life, Doc, I was always watering the leaves of the tree and complaining that the tree was dying. I was never watering the roots.
So you've said that really the street name for addiction
is spiritual strongholds.
Spiritual strongholds.
Yeah, addiction is the street name for spiritual stronghold.
Right.
False idols.
Yes, wow. False idols that we run to for the source of either my identity, my pleasure, easing my pain, whatever that might be.
To change the way I feel. To change the way I feel, because we want that quick fix. It could be work, it could be power, it could be exercise, it could be service work. The busy. I got to stay busy so I don't have to sit down and look at myself. And so all these things that we do, I do, and I find, and so how do I know if it's a problem? It's a mental obsession. Let me give you an example. Cell phone. Can you go without your cell phone for 24 hours without thinking about it? No. No. That's the mental obsession.
So we all understand.
Everyone's an addict.
Yeah, we all understand it. We even have a term for, in our culture, I think here in North Dallas, we call it workaholism, right?
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that my consequences were so severe. Because my consequence after my 27th mugshot, after losing everything and becoming homeless, living in a suburban behind the bait shop, at a lake. I don't know why alcoholics always end up at the lake, but that's
in a
where
van
we
down by the river.
I was in a stolen suburban.
Yeah.
And literally
You're in a stolen suburban.
I was in a stolen suburban saying, I got this. With a bug screen over the window.
Yeah.
And I got this. But thank God my consequences were so severe for me to finally realize that God will allow me to have all the control I want to, for everything to get completely out of control, for me to hit my knees and turn to Him to realize I never had control in the first place.
So in the culture, I've been to 12-step meetings.
Yeah, you crashed one time.
Yes, I've been to. Like friends who've gotten coins, their first year coin or whatever. I've done there, snuck in a few times. Man, there's more F-bombs dropped in those meetings. Man,
there are.
And there's a lot of cigarettes being smoked.
There are.
But I'm telling you. When I went to my first meeting, I was like, this is church, is what this is.
Yeah,
or how about this? The way church ought to be. Gut level honest. So amazing.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, this is how you start. Yeah. You admit that you have a problem. That's the first one, right? I'm powerless over this thing.
Honesty.
It's honesty.
Yeah.
And that's our great hope today, friends. This, if you kind of hear nothing else today, get honest. Get honest. Be real and get honest. That's the most courageous thing some of us are going to do today.
But we need to break that down, because it's very easy to say and easy to hear, okay? And I would hear things like that what do you mean? How do you do that? I'm honest. I can tell you the truth, But how do we get truly honest? And for me, after the 27th mugshot, I finally realized that God was all I had because He was all I need. Everything like that. But I had to really get honest. And it's like we hear, reach out, ask for help. You hear, go talk to someone. That's all good. But sin and addiction is the only disease that has to be self-diagnosed. It has to be self-diagnosed. I don't have the power. If I see someone, they go, well, do you think he's an alcoholic? I don't know. I mean, yeah, it kind of looks like it. I mean, he's running down the street, clucking like a chicken. He might be, but I don't have that power to do it. It has to be self-diagnosed. How do we do that? And for me, it was the most 3 powerful words that I use when I work with people today, and it's this: I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing the things I'm doing.
Wow. Even Paul says that in Romans 7.
That's it. That's right.
Everything comes back to
that's right.
To the Bible.
Don't know. I don't know why I drink. I don't know why I do drugs. I don't know why I overeat. I don't know why I gamble. I don't know why I work so much. I don't know why I'm so addicted to power. All these things. And the reason why I'm so grateful of my consequences were so severe, my rock bottom, is because I never did time with someone who was addicted to exercising. Hey, what are you in for? I exercise too much. You know what I mean? So my passion is what we talked about, to raise the bottom.
And you always hear, well, you got to hit rock bottom before you're ever going to come out. And that's the question I've had is, do you really have to hit rock bottom? I mean, it's clear when you're like, well, yeah, I was in prison. 27 mug shots, whatever. But hitting rock bottom, you want to raise the bottom, if you will, meaning you want to bring people to a point where they say, I am powerless, I need help. Is that what that's
right?
What
so if you hear my story, I used to be this guy, I'm successful from a worldly standard. But you could walk out of here and you go, man, what a great story. Guy, that's not my story yet. You're eligible too.
Yeah. And
so what we do is we raise the bottom, and I use my story to raise that bottom, to simply get honest.
Michael was a custom home builder, big time here even in North Dallas, Park Cities. You might be living in a house that he actually built. A bunch of houses here in the neighborhood, right? But so tell me this. So we've all heard kind of Nietzsche's definition of insanity. He says the definition of insanity, perhaps you've heard this, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
What do you
100%.
say? What do you say?
It's my definition. Insanity, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and knowing what the result's going to be. That's true insanity.
That's craziness.
That is true insanity. You put your hand on a hot stove, it burns. You don't do it anymore. You do heroin, it burns, and you get in trouble, and you get arrested, and you do it again.
Do it again, yeah.
And you do it again.
How about where a lot of people might be, we can talk about alcohol and drugs and such, but it could be, we said, screens, it could be pornography for a lot of not just men, but women as well. It could be a lot of things. So help, and I'll just use this as an analogy, something you've helped me understand that I think can be applied. Thinking about the functional alcoholic.
No such thing.
We hear that term.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, functional, I'm just trying to justify, my actions. It's like a functional murderer. It's like
I'm murdering people, but I'm still doing it.
But I'm functional.
Yeah. Or workaholic, but I'm still functioning.
I'm still functional.
While your family is
because what I'm doing is
dying.
I'm justifying it. I've never heard of a functional Christian. We haven't heard anybody say that. I'm trying to be one, hourly, and I fail. But here's the great thing about being in the spiritual realm or being in recovery, okay? The great thing is that I recognize my behaviors. You mentioned the neural pathways. That I had ingrained in my head these neural pathways that was the only way to go. Great analogy is if you're a golfer, a golf cart, getting off the cart path and it wears the dirt down. It wears it down the dirt. And so the guy comes in and he puts a rope up to change the golf carts to go a different way, and you're on green grass, right? And so what we've had to do is the Holy Spirit has rewired my neural pathway as a result of pain to go a different way. And I recognize if I start going this way, I go, whoa, I don't want to go there again. I call a mentor of mine, and I say, hey, I'm thinking this way. Why am I doing this? It's all a result of fear.
So what's the difference then between a social drinker and an alcoholic?
That's a good example. It's a great question. So the difference between a social drinker and an alcoholic, okay? Listen, there's nothing wrong with drinking. It's a luxury I don't have anymore. Just don't let it become your source. Don't let it become something that defines you. An alcoholic for me is that if I was going to go to the Cowboy game and they came over the radio and they said, just want to let y'all know that there's not going to be any alcohol served at the Cowboy game, I'm making a U-turn. Well, a lot of people would still go to the Cowboy game. Big deal, because the event was more important than the drink. That's the difference between a social drinker and an alcoholic, because for the alcoholic, the drug addict, food addiction, gambling, shopping, any visible thing that I'm mentally obsessed over, that's my God, okay?
Will there be drinks there? Right?
Yeah.
Or maybe, will there be ice cream there?
Yeah, ice cream there, yeah.
I mean,
I never was locked up with an ice creamaholic.
I'm a functional ice cream
But does that make sense?
eater.
That's the difference between a social drinker and an alcoholic.
Why is it that so many people, though, it's true, there's relative, levels of trauma and abuse in our past, whether we were not loved or we did, there's some repeat, signal or message in our minds. I'm not loved. I'm not enough. We receive maybe from family of origin. You've been through a lot of trauma. You've been through abuse in your past. Why is it that so many who've been through trauma that triggers alcoholism or addiction?
Well, trauma is my personal experience. I grew up. From when early as I can remember, I had real criminal trauma, done to me. My solution for that, not growing up in a godly home and religion, the church was right and I was wrong, I was never going to go there, was seeking visible things to try to make these things go away. On top of that, as a result of my consequences, I was now creating self-inflicted trauma. So I had trauma, active addiction, and self-inflicted trauma. And so what I had to do was I had to address my trauma. I had to address it, with professional help, and hit it head on and get honest with it and accept the role that I played in it, because I played a role in it.
Okay, parse that out. We've talked about this, but you played a role. You had trauma done to you. Like
with my grandfather, without getting into details, my grandfather was a young child. You mean you played a role in your grandfather and what he did to you? I sure did. Absolutely did. And my role that I played is I chose to hold on to the resentment.
Okay, post-trauma, you chose to hold on to resentment. So to get to the real problem is what you're talking about.
I have to look at the role I play in it.
And for you, the role you're playing, you meant, is resentment.
In that case, I chose to hold on to the resentment.
Okay.
Which carried and festered on, like you said, sin grows to death. It carried on to all parts of my life.
Wow. Okay, so you also talk about culturally that you say addiction is not the real problem. We got another problem.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I did an interview with I think it was either Fox or ESPN, and they said, if we build a wall around the country, will it solve this drug crisis? I said, no, I'm still getting loaded. The real problem is me, the addict. Okay. When I was incarcerated, I had this awakening that 100% of the people I was incarcerated with had little or no relationship with their father, including me. And so our crisis today is we have a lot of males, but it's the missing man. And it's time for men to take back the dinner table. Because us men, a kingdom man, we are responsible for our family. Yeah.
So
and that's where we start.
We're going to talk a lot more about that.
Yeah,
Michael's coming to our Men's Connect lunch. It's coming up, I think it's September 12th, but it's a Thursday coming up. You can find it on our website. Men, you need to be there. You can don't miss it. And women, wives, okay, elbow him now. You can put it in his phone, get it on your calendar. Come join us. We're going to take a deeper dive there, and it's going to be an amazing time. So, how about this? Earlier this week, when we were together, it's 2 Corinthians 10. Where Paul says this: for though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. You were talking about going back to what I could say, what he says are worldly weapons, not spiritual weapons, divine power to demolish strongholds. He says we take every captive, every thought we give over and captive to obedience to the Lord. So back to the idea that we're really wrestling with the spiritual stronghold. So we need to get that in our minds when we think about habitual sin, or I'm prone to go over there. Recognize that you're in a spiritual battle, and it will not be fought or won through worldly means. Right. So it's going to take, it's going to take prayer. It's going to take His Word, the truth of who we really are in Him. It's going to mean I am going to need community, people around me.
Right.
Who remind me.
And I love that scripture. When we were talking, I want to thank my fiance, Lee, who, by the way, I'm engaged to a preacher's kid.
You can't get away from it.
I can't make it, but I was talking to her. It's so great to have healthy conversation, but she helped me with this as far as a solution. She brought this scripture to hand, and that is the solution, is that recognizing that it's a spiritual battle. It's a spiritual battle, and when I recognize it, and listen, we talk about relapse, that's a relapse word, or like Paul says, going back to it. When my eyes wake up first thing in the morning, I'm in full-blown relapse because the flesh is unleashed, right?
Wow.
But I'm so grateful today that I recognize it. And when I recognize it, I literally give it to God and say, God, take it away. I don't have time for King James Version prayers. I get straight to the point. I say, God, you know what's happening.
Yeah.
Take this away.
And
I'm enjoying my freedom.
Just real honest. Just honesty before the Lord.
Right.
There knows the hearts. So I want to close with this, this thought that I have talked about here, because it was so freeing for me. And it was over a conversation we were having over lunch. And I was just asking you again, this is not just a few years ago probably, when I said, Michael, how do you do it, man? How do you do it? How do you stay sober? I want to learn. I'm going to keep learning from you. How in the world do you do this? And how did you answer the question?
Well, as you saw in the film there, and it's amazing how God just opened my eyes. And today I challenge and try to help people to see life through God's perspective, not the world's or the cultures. So I go back to the things that were done to me that were wrong, and I see it through a different perspective, going, I see why you allowed this to happen, so I can do this. So to answer your question, how do I do it? I keep reading to Uwe. I keep serving. Because right now, as I'm sitting here in this chair with Doc, okay, I have not once thought about the future, and I have not once thought about the past. And because it puts me in the safest place in the world, and that's right here, right now, because that's where God's at.
So that's what you all have heard me talk about, is to live in the present.
Yes.
To live in the present, because when you go to the past, what do you get? You get shame.
You get depression,
regret,
anger, resentment, rage,
failure,
shame.
all the things in the past.
Yes.
And if you jump to the future.
So my flesh wants to fix that, so I shift the view, so I jump to the future in my head, okay? And then I get in fear, I get anxious, I get worried. You know what worry is? When I'm worried, I'm literally telling God He doesn't know what He's doing. I get fearful. And so I play this game back and forth in my head.
Jumping over the present.
Jumping over today, this chair right here. So what I did is I want to make that slow down, so I do this. For the very first time. And that's called euphoria. That's not a spiritual awakening.
Or whatever that thing is that we go to.
Yeah, whatever it is. Because it puts me right here, right now. So how do I stay here? I do more. I do more. I do more. I do more.
Meaning you serve. You get outside of yourself.
Well, at the past, I was drinking more to stay in this false state of now.
Right.
But today what I do is serve. If you struggle with depression, okay, text just 5 people. Ask how they're doing. Or tell them to have a good day. It's getting out of self. And as you saw in this film, that's what God used an uneducated, illiterate, 75-year-old murderer to ask me to read to him. And 4 days went by and I wasn't anxious because I was out of self, serving someone else, expecting nothing in return.
Wow. It all comes back to Jesus, who said, hey, love God, love others, live in the moment, don't be anxious. The past is gone. And that's how we honor Him in the moment. It's a beautiful thing.
And that's what I've been doing for 7 years because it puts me in the safest place in the world right here, right now.
Praise the Lord. Hey, let's thank M2 The Rock, Michael, for being with us. We're so grateful for you, bro.
Appreciate it.
Love you. Thank you. All right. Hey, before I hand it over to those in the chapel and we wrap it up here, I want to encourage us, gang. What are you going to do? Today is the day. You don't have to keep living like this.